您好，我是光启社的社长马绍阿基，欢迎您收看这一周的教宗新闻罗马主场 Rome Report。在新闻的首先带您来看一个在全球拥有400万个会员的平信徒组织圣云仙大家庭。多年来，他们在经济环境尚未受到新冠肺炎疫情大流行的影响之前，就已经开展了很多济弱扶贫的慈善工作。而在疫情蔓延的当下，他们也持续在南美洲以及非洲等40个国家开展的13栋房子的运动，他们特别为无家可归者提供了固定的居所。
Even before the economic crisis was set off by the coronavirus pandemic, the International Vincentian family has been carrying out a number of projects to help the poor. For example, the 13 Houses campaign, currently underway in 40 countries, aims to provide permanent housing to the homeless. Today, the Vincentians count on approximately 4 million people and 161 branches or congregations in lay institutes worldwide.
In Lima, Peru, we're dealing with food distribution and access to drinkable water for those in poverty. In Honduras, 9 centers were created for at-risk elderly and the young, where they actually live and have all their needs met. In the Congo, we've established medical centers for the treatment of COVID. And in Rwanda, we've been dealing with refugee camp, trying to provide food and education opportunities, especially for the young.
Following the charism of St. Vincent de Paul, the mission of the Vincentian family is to bring people of diverse backgrounds together to serve the poor.
And he saw that it had to be done simultaneously, both in the preaching of the word and in the meeting of their everyday needs. For him, you cannot separate the two, meaning he was able to see beyond the concrete services, the realities, to the presence of God, especially in the face of the poor person.
Although the pandemic has interrupted some of the Vincentian family's projects, including the 13 Houses campaign in Philadelphia, its members are determined to keep up with their mission.
Even after COVID, our work with homelessness is not going to end. It predated COVID, and it certainly is going to go on after COVID. COVID has exasperated the work. It did not initiate it, and it will not end it.
The Vincentian family has also created a webpage, famvin.net, to showcase its different projects and connect them to donors interested in supporting their work.
再来关注宗教自由的新闻。越南政府在2018年的1月通过了信仰及宗教法，严格规范管理宗教。虽然条例包含了正面的条文，例如承认宗教团体为法人，但也要求宗教团体向政府注册。这也使得越南政府限制了宗教的庆典，甚至借此扩大镇压人权分子。最近，美国国际宗教自由委员会特别敦促政府，希望将越南重新列入特别关注国家的黑名单。
In 2004, the U.S. State Department designated Vietnam as a country of particular concern, or CPC. Small improvements in religious freedom conditions prompted the government to lift this designation in 2006. Now, an alarming rise in the number of prisoners of conscience is prompting the United States Commission for International Religious Freedom, USCIRF, to urge the government to put Vietnam back on the list.
Religion in Vietnam remains heavily regulated under the Law on Belief and Religion, which went into effect in January 2018. While the law did introduce some positive changes, such as recognizing religious organizations as legal persons, it also requires religious groups to register with the government.
This same law has also been used by Vietnamese authorities to crack down on religious ceremonies. It's part of the government's wider attempt to subdue human rights defenders, even those who advocate peacefully, like Nguyen Bach Truyen and Pastor A. Dao.
Mr. Truyen is a Wahao Buddhist who advocated on behalf of religious communities and prisoners of conscience. In April 2018, he was sentenced to 11 years imprisonment. Pastor A. Dao led an unregistered church for Montagnard Christians. He was arrested and sentenced to 5 years imprisonment.
Now USCIRF is actively working to obtain both men's liberation.
In the meantime, we urge the government to allow U.S. diplomats to visit them in prison to ensure that they are being well treated and that their medical needs are being met.
According to the annual report, Protestants and An Dai Dao Buddhists make up the highest percentage of prisoners of conscience in Vietnam, followed by Hoa Hao Buddhists and Catholics. Regardless of individual religious beliefs, USCIRF continues to support those whose fundamental freedoms have been violated.
同样也是关注人权的议题，随着多国放宽出入境限制，许多不孕夫妇终于可以亲赴乌克兰接回代理孕母为他们生育的婴儿。但是在新冠肺炎疫情肆虐期间，有报道指称46名新生的婴儿被滞留在基辅的一家酒店内。乌克兰希腊里天主教会的大总主教出面谴责这些婴儿没有人关爱，被当作人口贩运的货物。这种代孕的制度既不利于婴儿，也侵犯妇女的尊严。
As travel restrictions begin to ease in many countries, couples are being allowed into Ukraine to collect their babies born to surrogate mothers. As couples meet their infants for the first time, the Ukrainian Catholic bishop's joint statement denouncing surrogate motherhood still stands. It was released in mid-May after 46 newborns were found stranded in a hotel in Kiev because of the coronavirus pandemic. They're babies without parents, babies without human affection, babies being treated like objects of human trafficking. It's precisely because of a lack of legislation on the topic of assisted motherhood or assisted procreation. The head of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church says surrogate motherhood is both detrimental to the babies and an affront to women's dignity. He explains that it is often women with financial issues who are targeted by surrogacy clinics and pressured into signing contracts and selling their bodies to provide children to paying couples. Then, for whatever reason, this couple, who asked for a baby from a rented uterus, can deny any responsibility. They can abandon this woman with the baby. It's really heartbreaking because this type of relationship between the woman and these reproductive health centers is truly a relationship of slavery. Although Ukraine is a surrogacy hotspot, the head of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church says the problem extends far beyond the country, since it is typically foreigners who pay for surrogate mothers. If in the world we live the throwaway culture, as Pope Francis says, or the culture of death, as St. Pope John Paul II used to say, one way or another, these centers will continue to be built to fill the demand that emerges from these sorts of cultures. Thus, the Catholic bishops of Ukraine continue to appeal to the Ukrainian government and all people of goodwill to defend the dignity of women and children, starting with legislation banning surrogate motherhood.
在过去，我们曾经报道一位记者构思出了一个为他人提供美味热餐的想法，于是为他煮意的食谱就诞生了。而在今年整个上半年，受到新冠肺炎疫情的影响，不仅打击家庭的健康，同时也打击了经济的收入。成千上万的人失去了收入的来源，甚至需要有食物的援助。这时候，为他煮意的团体就带动了团结互助的效益。
The pandemic hit not only the health of families, but their economies as well. Thousands of them have lost their sources of income, and food banks, parishes, and NGOs are stepping up to help. There are people who help by buying food for others. There are others who help by cooking for them. That's because not all poor people have access to a kitchen, for example, those who live in the streets. The idea to offer these people good hot meals led to the publication of this cookbook, Cocinar para Otros, in English, Cooking for Others. Journalist Paloma Garcia Ovejero came up with the idea, and Susana Perez, author of the website huevosfritos.es, provided the recipes. The goal is to promote solidarity by encouraging people to cook for their neighbors in need. The world changes thanks to small people doing small things in small places. We firmly believe cooking for others can be one of those little things. Even if it doesn't change the world, it can take away someone's hunger. I can assure you that whoever receives your plate of hot food, or the sandwich you prepared, or that Tupperware full of salad, that person's day changes. We decided the recipes had to meet 4 requirements. The first was a low budget. Second, each portion had to meet the hydrate, protein, and vegetable needs. Third, it had to be easy to transport. Fourth, it had to be easy to prepare quickly and in large quantities in case it had to be reheated. It includes 20 simple, complete, homemade Spanish recipes, from a delicious bowl of lentils with veggies and chorizo to pea soup with eggs. It even includes recipes for what could be called emergency meals, those prepared with whatever's left and lots of creativity. What's crucial with this type of recipe is being imaginative and being able to convert almost any leftovers into fantastic meals. It's also important to be able to make the best seasoning out of what's available. You'd be surprised by how good a baked potato can taste when you combine it with whatever's left in your refrigerator. Cocinar para Otros can be downloaded for free, though its author suggests making a donation to Caritas. The book is a burst of creative solidarity in difficult times, like during a pandemic. It's a project with the potential to inspire similar initiatives beyond Spain.
一位91岁的意大利配乐大师莫里科内7月6号清晨在罗马离世。莫里科内曾经获得2届奥斯卡金像奖，他在离世前数天因为大腿骨折住院，而他的律师表示，莫里科内在信仰慰藉及亲人陪伴下安详的离世。而在他离世前，其中一件作品是为教宗方济各谱写弥撒曲。这首作品在罗马的耶稣堂演奏，庆祝耶稣会复会200周年，透过乐曲向教宗表达敬意。
The grand composer and 2-time Oscar winner Ennio Morricone died the morning of July 6 in a hospital in Rome. He was 91 years old and had broken his femur only a few days before. His lawyer said he received the comfort of faith and that he was accompanied by his family. One of his final works was a Mass for Pope Francis. He dedicated it to the pontiff on the 200th anniversary of the restoration of the Jesuits in the Jesuit Church in Rome. The Italian composer was one of the greats of the 20th century cinema. Soundtracks like those for The Mission and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly have been engraved in the collective memory of entire generations. During the quarantine, young people like Jacopo played Morricone's most famous songs from the balconies of their homes in Rome. The virus allowed the whole country to come to terms with its fragility. Morricone's songs reminded them that even the person next door can attain great heights, just like the Italian composer did when he conquered Hollywood.
随着防疫隔离政策的放宽，一个史上规模最大的拉斐尔名作展终于在永恒之城重新开展。这是位在罗马的奎里纳勒博物馆为拉斐尔特展再一次的开幕。
One of history's most ambitious exhibitions showcasing Raphael's masterpieces has finally reopened in the Eternal City. The second inauguration of Raffaello, housed in the Scuderia del Quirinale in Rome, was met with just as much, if not more, excitement as the first. After all, it wasn't just weeks, but months of quarantine depriving art lovers of these priceless works.
Ricominciamo. Questa è la più grande.
We're restarting. This is the biggest exhibition of Raphael ever made. Raphael is the greatest painter of the Renaissance. The Renaissance is the most brilliant period in Italian history. Thus, it's only natural and obvious that the reopening of this exhibition had to be a part of Italy's reopening process. The exhibition commemorates 500 years since the death of the artist. It boasts masterpieces like the portrait of Pope Leo X with Cardinals Giulio de' Medici and Luigi de' Rossi. Other works revealing the artist's complete mastery of his craft include the portrait of a woman called La Velata, the portrait of a woman in the role of Venus, the portrait of Baldassare Castiglione, and the portrait of Giulio II. There is also a collection of sketch studies and many other works on loan from other museums, including the Uffizi galleries in Florence. The collection is complete. Every piece is there. The day the exhibition closed, March 8th, I made the decision that the Uffizi would leave their nearly 150 works in Rome for all the time necessary, whatever it takes. It's the same solidarity we received from European museums and museums everywhere. To view the more than 200 pieces in the collection, visitors must respect a number of health safety measures. These include wearing masks and strictly following the arrows and distancing markers on the ground. Hand sanitizer and temperature checks are also made available at the building's entrance. The Raffaello exhibition will be open to visitors until August 30th, 2020. Its ambitious grandiosity befits the inimitable genius of Raphael, whose art continues to make an impact even 500 years after his death.
感谢您收看这一周的教宗新闻罗马主场 Rome Report， 我是光启社的社长马绍阿基，祝福大家平安喜乐，我们下一周再会。
嗨，你好，我是黑幼龙。今天的主题呢是怎么样教小孩子会认错。公司里面会有冲突，可是如果有人有这个本事，我会认错，我会道歉，这个公司可以基业长青的。抓住时机，培养你的小孩，帮助你的小孩培养这种能力。慢养，做不操心的父母，养育更优秀的孩子。
光启社需要您的支持与赞助，可使用邮政划拨汇款，收款户名财团法人光启文教视听节目服务社，邮拨账号00035511。本节目由光启社媒体福传以爱还爱影音工程计划赞助播出。2020年耶稣会士南怀仁传需要您的支持与赞助，请扫描影片中的 QR code 或电洽0227712136转200。您的支持是我们继续前进的动力。